All right, guys. Yesterday I did my first podcast and it was on the idea of fair versus equal. Unfortunately, due to a lot of technical issues, the VOD isn't usable to chop up and make a video. A couple of mistakes I made, and I'm always willing to admit I make mistakes. I'm a new creator at the whole podcast idea, but I didn't want to not put out a video on fair and equal that's just more easily digestible. Big problem is my entire life, and I know I don't look it, I'm 43 years old. My entire life, I've constantly heard people say, that's not fair. But a lot of times the things that they're saying are, that's not fair, they're absolutely fair. Fair and equal are not synonyms. To give you guys a little background and where this really got knocked into my head, about 23 years ago, I was in my graduate program for education. I met a wonderful professor named Margaret Carroll. She's written numerous books on education. One of her things she always said was, you have to treat kids fairly, but you have to treat them equally. Well, I didn't know what that meant. So I remember staying after class once and asking her to break it down for me. And what she told me was, in every one of your classrooms, you're going to have a certain amount of kids who are the really high performers. And you're going to have some kids that are really the low performers. So imagine you took the class and you divide it in half. And you put the high performers on this side, and you put the low performers on this side. If you tell the high performers that they have to do a worksheet, and they have to do numbers 1 through 30, that's fair. If you tell the kids that are the low performers, they only have to do numbers 1 through 15, that is also fair. You aren't treating the kids equally because the kids aren't performing equally. You tell those high-performing kids they need to do 30 equations or 30 questions. Let's say it takes them 10 minutes. The low-performing kids are going to spend 10 minutes doing just 1 to 15. So when you stop treating the words fair and equal like synonyms, and you understand that fair and equal have different meanings, then you'll start to understand that that teacher in the scenario is treating their kids both fairly and equally. They're treating them fairly because they're giving everyone what they deserve. But they're treating them equally because they understand that not every kid started at the same point in education. So you're giving each kid an equal amount of access to the education they need. Little Johnny has an A+ in math. Giving little Johnny 30 math questions is, just practice. It's opportunities for repetition. But, little Brian is struggling at math. If you give him 30 problems, you might as well give him 300. He's not going to be able to get it. As we move into our adult lives, everybody constantly screams equality. I want equality. But what does equality mean? If equality means getting the identical thing, then think about all the scenarios where you really don't want equality. One of the scenarios I can think of is I walked into the DMV, I walked right up to the counter, did my eye exam. I didn't even need to do my written test. I hadn't had a ticket. I haven't had an accident. I didn't need to do anything on my license renewal. My spouse, who has had a couple of tickets, had to go in, had to do the eye exam, had to do the written test, passed the written test, and was out the door. We have a friend who went into the DMV, had a couple of tickets and an accident, and they were told you have to take the driving test. Is that fair? Yes. Really, really good driver doesn't have to jump through the hoops. Medium okay driver has to jump through some hoops. Bad driver has to jump through all the hoops. Is it equal? No, nor should it be equal. I shouldn't have to go into the DMV to take the written test and the road test just because we decide everybody's going to be equal and everybody has to take it each and every time. There's another really good example where I know people are going to back down on the I want full equality. You go into the emergency room at the hospital with a gunshot wound to your chest. You are in a life-threatening situation. You want fairness. You want everybody getting what they need. You need immediate access to the medical staff. You need immediate access to an operating room. You need immediate access to a trauma surgeon. You want fairness. You want your You want your fair access to the services you need. But if you say, I want equality, well then wait in line. Be number 17, now treating number 4 as you continue to bleed out. See, people constantly use the words they want in the situations they want them, but words matter. We simply can't just start using words differently when it best suits us. A lot of people are going to try to do that, but then that waters down the word. And then it confuses the next generation. If you're a parent and you're using the words fair and equal inappropriately, then your children are going to grow up not understanding fair and equal. The last one is going to be a little controversial. Money. There has been this idea that we need to have fair and equal in the distribution of wealth. As I've said many times on my shows, time is money, money is freedom, freedom is time. I get that there is a group of people that look at the super uber wealthy rich and say, how much is enough? You don't need to have that much wealth. You could stop making money at $100 million a year and the rest of that money could trickle down. And that's a great idea. That's an amazing principle. It'd be something that I would love to see executed. But the truth of the matter is, people are claiming that in some sort of, we need to be equal. But in this case, you asking for equality makes that unfair. Do I think that $100 million a year is more than enough for any individual to acquire? Yes, I do. As a personal stance, I do think $100 million is a threshold that does not need to be crossed. At the same time, I understand that saying if they make more than $100 million a year, we're going to tax them. I understand that the rich will just stop making more than $100 million a year. And that doesn't mean there's more wealth or excess wealth to be generated. Do I think there are better ways to do things than the way some of these businesses are running them? Absolutely. Do I think that when it comes to Elon Musk walking into Twitter and firing 75% of the staff, do I think that was a bad move? On one hand, yes, I do. I think walking in and firing 75% of the staff is an absolutely bad move. But anybody complaining about what he did and how he did it, I'd like to remind you, he gave everybody a 90-day severance, not a 60-day notice. In 60 days, you have to keep coming to work for me, and in 60 days, you won't have a job. He said, here's 90 days pay. Unfortunately, the company I just acquired is hemorrhaging $4 million a day, but I'm still going to pay you all through the holidays. People paint Elon Musk out to be a really bad guy with the things he's doing with Twitter. But nobody wants to dig into the parts of the story where he says he walked into his newly acquired business, he was asking people what they do, and they weren't able to articulate what they do. If you ever get asked the question, what do you do for the company? You need to be able to respond in such a way that you're writing your LinkedIn bio, that you're writing your resume objective, that you're writing your cover letter. What do you do? I am the owner and operator of all of my brands. I produce 200 to 300 music tracks a year. I provide millions of minutes of Twitch programming. I provide hundreds of thousands of hours of YouTube programming. These are the things you need to be able to say each and every time you're asked. I want to say that the idea of taxing the rich after a certain threshold is something that's been tried before in the United States, and it's a constant reminder to me that people don't know their own history, so they keep making the same mistakes. If you told the richest 1% that they could only make $100 million a year in wealth, they would only make $100 million a year in wealth. They're not going to continue to spend their time, which represents their freedom, generating wealth just to pay taxes. Now, I know this is probably going to cause a whole bunch of jumping off discussions, and that's absolutely fine. If you think that we need to close a bunch of the tax loopholes so the uber rich can't do things like pass down generational wealth without paying their fair share of taxes, I agree with you. If you think that we need to plug the loopholes where the rich can't donate a painting and artificially inflate the value of that painting to get a tax break, I absolutely agree with you. But I think we need to take each and every scenario and talk about it through the lenses of, is this fair? Is this equal? I want to thank you guys for popping by this video. Like I said, the VOD from the podcast was unusable the way I wanted to use it. There's a couple of things that I'm going to have to figure out to make this better, but I wanted to make sure this video was done because I constantly talk about fair and equal, and I wanted this video available. You guys take care, and I will see you next week, or I'll see you every Saturday for my podcast on both Twitch and YouTube.